Welcome, everybody, to Highside, Lowside, Season 5, Episode 11. This is the penultimate episode. Spurge, can you tell the people what that means?
I learned through the educational experience that is Highside, Lowside that penultimate means the second to last. So this is not the last episode. That will come roughly 2 to 3 weeks after you're watching this one. But this is our comments episode. And we do this every season. We're the second to last episode. We go through and we pull all the comments that you've left for us throughout the season, all the emails you've sent, and we pick our favorites. And we have an episode where we discuss all of your stuff. And frankly, Zach, we've got some doozies for today.
We certainly do. So, yes, the agenda for today, as Spurge said, it'll just be the two of us here with you for the remainder. Sorry, no exciting guest. We will cover the news. We'll give away some T-shirts. We'll, of course, talk about your comments and questions, which we're excited to dive into. But foremost, right now, we will, of course, give a shout out to our benevolent sponsor, correct?
And that kind of ties into one of the comments that we'll talk about later, our overlord Motul.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that, you know, Zach, I sent you that care package. I know that you were going to use some of that Motul leather cleaner on those dirty shoes of yours. How is that coming along?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I'm fortunate in so much as the boots that I wear on a daily basis or a semi-daily basis are just to the right of my desk here. I did have a hiccup with the using the leather food on these boots, and I will show those of you watching on YouTube what that hiccup was, and Spurgeon will describe exactly what the problem is.
So Zach is currently taking his pants off. I don't know why he has to do that. Oh wait, no,
that's not true. So these are the boots in question. These are the Alpine Stars Monty boots.
These are a nice pair of. They look like for those of you listening, it's like a hipster pair of boots. It matches with Zach's Southern California lifestyle. They're well worn. The laces look like they've been tattered. There's some good patina to the leather.
This is the second pair of laces I've had on these boots because the uppers have held up so well. They're quite nice. I like them. However, the sole.
Oh,
yeah. As you
Motul
can see, the
leather
sole,
cleaner can't fix that.
No, Motul leather cleaner and leather food cannot help the sole, which is not leather and is cracking and coming apart. So now I'm in a bind with these boots because I like them, and I was gonna try to treat the leather and keep them healthy, but unfortunately, I got to get another pair. I did hear from our gear guru, Pat McHugh, that the Monty V2 boot, they've updated the compound of the sole so that this won't happen. So I hear. I'd like to get a pair to test, but I haven't yet.
So I would say that, you know, if Motul is listening, perhaps they could create a sole repair glue. Like maybe it's like a compound that you mix together, and it's kind of like when you're fixing something with JB Weld, except for it's a special foot compound. So until they do that, though, I mean, we're going to be limited to what we can clean with the leather cleaner.
Maybe it could be the Highside, Lowside edition, the sole compound. So sole repair, and they could spell it SOUL because
I love it.
Everyone needs a little bit of sole repair after listening to Highside, Lowside, surely.
Well, either way, thanks to Motul for all the shenanigans they let us get away with. It's been another great season with those knuckleheads as our sponsors, and we're looking forward to hopefully bringing them back for season 6 as we round out season 5 here. But again, thanks to Motul, and let's jump into our T-shirt winners for the episode. Zach, I believe we picked 2 this time, right?
We did pick 2 T-shirt winners because this is the sort of viewer listener appreciation episode where it's entirely focused on the audience. So we figured giving away 2 T-shirts is the right thing to do. First up, do you want to take the first one? I'm going to take the first one. Whatever.
I'm not sure how to pronounce this one's name, so why don't you take this one?
I'll take this one. Friendly reminder that these reviews come from the Apple podcast platform where we go in, we read reviews. If someone has something particularly interesting to say, we usually select them and give them a T-shirt. You can also send comments to Highside Lowside at RevZilla.com as a friendly reminder. The first winner is, drumroll, Betogi. I'm going to go with Betogi. The review subject was future Motul customer. Betogi says, stumbled on the podcast and wanted to learn about motorcycles before buying one. You guys pushed me to finally take a beginner MSF course in California. I am now in the search of the right bike. Just finished the Moto dating game episode, and loved how helpful it was for a range of riders. As usual, we are very susceptible to flattery. So Batogi seemed to like the podcast, but we did like that Batogi got into motorcycling, listened to Highside, Lowside, went and took an MSF course, and is diving into the world of two wheels. So you can't hear everyone, all the both Highside, Lowside listeners applauding Batogi, but everyone is applauding with you, and we especially. In fact, let's applaud. Yeah.
I would say it's interesting because Batogi is claiming too that he is coming for the Spotify Wrapped title. So for those of you that remember earlier,
I saw that, yes.
Yeah, earlier this season we highlighted all of those of you that were posting the Spotify Wrapped results, and the Highside Lowside podcast was a high numbered result for a lot of motorcycle aficionados out there, and it seems like Batogi has been coming for the title for this year. So we'll see how that pans out.
We'll see where Batogi ends up in Spotify Wrapped come next year.
We could have used Batogi.
So
we could have used Batogi for the Motul 30-second call out too, because it seems like now that he or she is getting a motorcycle, they're going to be putting some Motul lubricant in that engine as well.
True enough.
Hear that.
So friendly reminder, Batogi, send your preferred t-shirt size and mailing address to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com to claim your prize.
Next winner is Little Goliath, newer rider. Really thankful for all the helpful information and enjoyable content that Little Goliath receives on Highside Lowside. We definitely aim to be entertaining, if nothing else. This is the snow plowing podcast, as this person refers to it. Likes to listen to Zack complain about his chilly garage as this person heads out to fight real blizzards. So Zack, they're really calling you out for your Southern California complaining about the weather in your garage.
True. Yep.
As I walk, so they write, as I walk past my garage, frozen and shuttered, this is the warm garage I long for, filled with buddies and beer, with sunshine and endless curves around the corner. So
that's some good writing right there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so they should write articles for us describing Highside Lowside, because I don't think it necessarily feels as warm and fuzzy as always as it's being described here by Little Goliath. But Little Goliath says the podcast is a candle keeping the flame of motorcycle alive during the long night of the upper Midwestern winter. So Zack, perhaps you should stop complaining about your cold garage, because Little Goliath is out there plowing snow.
Yeah, I don't think I'll stop complaining, but I do appreciate where Little Goliath is coming from here.
The final note from Little Goliath is he says that he wants to give a big shout out to my dad, to Spurgeon's dad, as he or she is 4 years and 4 bikes into motorcycling and has just discovered that the V-Strom is one heck of a great machine. So I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, the V-Strom is a great bike. I think we joke about the V-Strom quite a bit here, and my father obviously loves one, and Zack obviously loves it. But it seems like Little Goliath is a V-Strom rider as well.
Indeed. Any shout out to Spurgeon Seniors is a good shout out as far as I'm concerned.
He's a better man than I, so we'll leave it at that.
Than most of us. So both of you send your t-shirt size preference and mailing addresses to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com, and thank you for your reviews and your fun messages, and particular tip of the cap to Little Goliath there for the great writing. The podcast is a candle keeping the flame of motorcycling alive. If only. So on to the news. We do have a couple of things we wanted to talk about quickly. Not breaking news, as always here on Highside Lowside. We don't really do breaking news.
But we give you some opinions about the news. So it's not just the information, but you get to hear what Zack thinks about all the news.
So, friendly reminder for Get On Adventure Fest in Sturgis, South Dakota, which will happen July 14 through July 17 of 2022. So if you got some major FOMO from our Get On Adventure Fest in Mojave Desert in California, you can get on your adventure festing in Sturgis in the middle of July. So keep that on your radar.
Makes a great family vacation for the kids. So scrap Disneyland this year and just come hang out at an adventure bike festival in the middle of the Black Hills.
Exactly. Next news item we want to talk about was IMS Outdoors being canceled. Spurge, I feel like you had some comments and some opinions on this one.
Well,
here.
yeah, I think the big news here, not only was IMS Outdoors canceled, but this was something that we had talked about in the first episode of season 5 with Lance Oliver.
Uh-huh.
And we had talked about how it was going to be really interesting to see how IMS Outdoors played out. For those of you that aren't aware, the International Motorcycle Show, IMS, was, I think for like 40 years, has been this big motorcycle show in the United States that travels around. I think it was international because it hit Canada too.
Right.
But it was originally happened during the winter months. So they swapped it during the pandemic. They made it an outdoor summer festival where people could come and take demo rides. And I think one of the big concerns that we had when we talked about this with Lance was whether or not it was going to compete with everything else that's already happening in the summer months. People are taking vacations. Right. People are riding their motorcycles places. Do you really want to go to a trade show? And it seems like it's not.
In some ways, the having him in big convention centers in all over the country in the middle of the winter, from December to February or something like that, was kind of smart because all the motorcyclists were jonesing, especially in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, whatever, these places that were snowy and cold. They were sort of like, yeah, I'll go to a big convention center and walk around and sit on new bikes and look at new bikes and learn about new products and get excited about the riding season.
Yeah, little Goliath is taking his snowplow out to the motorcycle show in the winter months, trying to get some jonesing for some motorcycling.
So I think, I don't know, they've canceled. As of right now, they've canceled all the shows, the rest of the shows for 2022, right? And the question is sort of like, is this a forever? Like, is it just over now?
I mean, the implication kind of was like, it's over. It really kind of struck me as something where I think they were having trouble getting vendors to show up. I think they were having trouble driving revenue, and yeah. I mean, keep in mind too that the part of IMS was they had to get the motorcycle OEMs to participate, and I think in the winter months those OEMs had a lot less going on, so it fit into their schedule better. Versus in the summertime, OEMs are doing demos and everything else all over the place. So it's still up in the air as to whether IMS will come back in its old form or take a new form. But as of right now, I think this speaks volumes to really what do motorcycle trade shows look like moving forward, especially now that so many OEMs have been able to figure out how to get launches out on the internet. But I think it was you that said it, Zach. Sure. You can't ride a bike on the internet. So, what's going to take the place of this?
Much as I've tried. I think it's I'm interested to see what happens next, because I don't think that IMS, I don't think all the motorcycle shows were ever perfect, but I was always a little bit excited, to be perfectly honest. I always liked, even being a part of the industry, I always liked going to those shows and getting to walk around and see all the new bikes in person and swing a leg over them. And so I think it was fun. So I hope that something steps in to replace it, whether it's a big, whether it's demo days. Perhaps it'll be Get On Adventure Fest. Maybe that'll be the next big thing.
But no, I agree with you. I think it was fun. It was a way for I would go up and hang out with friends in New York, or I'd come out to LA and I would see you, or I'd see Ari, and we would, hang out and grab dinner. It was a nice way to reconnect with friends that rode motorcycles, especially during the winter months. So we'll see what happens there.
Next news story.
Take it. I'll read it. You explain. So the title is Revolutionary Showy Optixon Helmet is Edging Towards Production.
This is edging.
So
basically, this is if memory serves, this is a heads-up display helmet from Shoei. Is that how you're reading it?
I actually just had an itch on my head. I wasn't trying to be funny there, but yes, that's exactly what it's like. What was the manufacturer that? Scully. This is kind of like a version of Scully that doesn't take your money and buy a Ferrari and never talk to you again.
So there was Scully, and there's also what was the name of the other one? There was one that you could clip to a helmet. Remember? Do you remember that one?
We sold them
to the chin bar. Did you? Wow. Okay.
RevZilla, not we. Like I wasn't selling them out of the back of my car like a Scully rep, but RevZilla had them, as I believe, for a while. We tested them.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. I remember Ari tested it back at Motorcyclist, and he was, I don't know,
less than impressed.
A little bit unimpressed. The heads-up display thing is like kind of cool. I drove a Corvette years ago that had a heads-up display, and I was like, that's kind of cool. And then I tried the heads-up display and the helmet thing, and I guess I get it, but I'm still not sold on it. However, the thing I want to get across here is that I feel about this similarly as electric as I do to electric motorcycles or like swappable batteries in motorcycles or something like that. Cool in concept, but I'm only really excited about it when a major company puts a major foot forward and puts their might behind it and their name behind it. And Shoei doing it is interesting to me because I think Shoei is a good motorcycle helmet company, and I think it means more when Shoei says something like, "Hey, we've got this thing we're going to try," rather than a startup or some company you've never heard of saying it's the next big thing. So I'm curious. I'm cautiously curious about it.
Would you be rushing out to get one? Be honest. Don't lie.
No, but my mind is open. I would be rushing out to try one. I'm interested. I want to try it. But like I said, I'm not sold yet. Anyway, well, it's something to keep an eye on, and I think it's interesting. It's very interesting because it's a major player in the helmet game moving in this direction potentially.
Fair enough. And speaking of major players, and speaking of electric motorcycles, which you are sometimes skeptical of, that takes us into the final news story of the day, which is a new Livewire is being introduced. Now, keep in mind that Livewire has branched off from Harley-Davidson. Livewire is now its own brand, and they are introducing a new model. So I wonder, what does that... Because the bike used to be called the Livewire. What's the old Livewire called now? Do you know that?
Livewire 1.
Livewire 1, is it really?
Okay. I think so. It's Livewire 1 all caps, so maybe it's an acronym. I don't know.
Okay, well,
but I'm pretty sure Livewire 1 is the Harley Livewire has turned into Livewire 1.
Okay, and that's under the Livewire company.
Yes, I believe so.
Because now we are getting the Livewire S2 Del Mar and a Del Mar LE, which has just been announced. By the time you're listening to this, it was a couple weeks ago, but literally was announced today. With an MSRP of $17,699
that's for the LE, right?
That's for the limited edition one. Yep. Now, as of this morning, we got an email from Harley-Davidson's press team saying that all 100 of the limited edition ones have been bought. They sold out in under 24 hours.
They sold out in 18 minutes, didn't they?
Is that what it was? I just know it was under 24 hours, so 18 minutes. There you go.
They sold out in 18 minutes with a refundable deposit. So it's maybe not quite the same as actually, people actually plopping down $17,500 non-refundable. I think it might have taken a little bit longer than 18 minutes to sell out. But yeah, the first 100 bikes are spoken for technically, as you said.
But if you didn't get your name on that list, there's another series coming out, and that's the non-limited edition. That's $15,000.
And they're aiming for a $15,000 MSRP, I believe. Is that right?
So they might be more, is what you're telling me?
Or they might be less, but yeah, probably there'll be more. I don't know. I remember the rhetoric in the email thinking they're not saying it's going to be that.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
So what you get for the money, you get a 80 horsepower electric vehicle, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. City riding range is claimed to be roughly 100 miles. Now, what I will say is, Zach, and this is probably, a good question for you. You probably had a little bit more time with the original Livewire than I did. But it seems to me that if you're really cranking down on the thing, the mileage rain dissipates quickly. Yes. So they're claiming, 100 miles of city riding. I'm guessing that might not be a full 100 miles if you're really romping on the thing. Sound about fair?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, okay. Probably not. But city riding is easier on electric motors than on the batteries than riding on a highway. So even if it's frankly, if they say it's up to 100 miles and then it turns out that it's 60 or 75 miles of range, that's still pretty good. It's not great for $15,000. But it's not bad for an electric vehicle of this size. Because I think the weight, what's the weight spec again?
I want to say it's sub 400 pounds.
Yeah, or 400 or 410 or something. It was around 400 pounds, I think.
I thought the email said sub 400, but I could be wrong on that. Either way, considerably lighter than the original Livewire. And, as far as looks go, we will throw a picture of it up on the screen, and we'll let you be the judge, because looks are subjective, and frankly, Zach and I don't need to comment on how we think this thing looks.
No. But we could. What do you think, Spurge?
I mean, I don't think it's something that I find particularly attractive, but they say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not planning on beholding one of these anytime soon. So, I mean, they sold out of the limited edition ones, so there's obviously people out there like them. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, to give you an idea, it kind of is like their version of like an urban flat tracker, like 19-inch rims. They're using the Dunlop flat track tires. So is that about accurate, Zach? Like a handlebar, upright seating position?
It's a sort of like a it's like a flat track bike as if it were drawn by for the Simpsons. You know, it's like sort of like a cartoony flat tracker, like a little bit like bubbly tires and like a little bit squat and funny looking. Like the proportions aren't quite right, but I mean, it's unique. I don't love the way it looks either, but you know, sometimes this stuff grows on you. And I just looked up the weight for what it's worth in the email, and it's all very. It says the weight target for the model is 440 pounds.
440, okay.
Range is expected to be 100 miles. So this is the kind of language they're using. It's sort of like, this is what it should be.
Well, I know that you're a Simpsons fan, so this might look good in your garage after all.
True, I am a Simpsons fan, so maybe it's the flat track bike I've always wanted. All right, should we get into the actual episode here?
I think we should. This is the comments episode, folks. We are here to talk about your comments, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages.
Well, children of certain ages, maybe above 14.
We bleep out all the profanity, which is actually some of the comments that we've gotten that people want to hear us curse, apparently.
So, the very first comment we're going to read here, I'm going to let Spurgeon prepare himself.
I'm going to see if I can do this, right? What are we looking at, Zach?
Spurgeon has grabbed his guitar, he has turned on his amplifier, and the first question of episode 11 here is a question about the podcast intro music. Is that you playing the guitar, Spurge? I follow you on Instagram and saw your story about restoring your dad's guitar back during the pandemic and always wondered if that was you. There he is.
Can you actually hear that? I don't know if it's coming through
the
microphone.
Give us another riff. I talked over the first part.
Sorry. I'm going to angle the microphone down a little bit.
There you have it, everybody. The Highside, Lowside theme as played by Spurgeon Dunbar. To answer your question, no, it is not Spurgeon playing in the actual intro music. But now that he's learned the song, perhaps it should be. So maybe start passing out a petition on Reddit.
I spent all of 5 minutes figuring that out for all of you.
Because you're a supreme talent. Anyway,
I just like to keep my neighbors on my toes. I live in a townhouse, and that was actually pretty loud, despite what it sounded like on the old recording.
Well, thank you for the email that came in from Matt. We appreciate it. We appreciate Spurge, giving Spurge a chance to expand his musical horizons, and everyone that listens to Highside Lowside just expanded their musical horizons as well because you heard the theme as played by Spurge. Spurge, I think you should record it, and that should be the new intro song.
So. It's interesting.
So
the guitar that Matt wrote in about is actually the guitar sitting behind me. So.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, that's actually the guitar that I was repairing. I keep a little tab on the top of my Instagram following where I put all the little repairs that I do, which is I'm kind of like the like somebody said the other day, like I'm like the Ari Henning of guitars, where like Ari spends his time working on motorcycles and I spend my time working on guitars. But that's actually the guitar that Matt was referring to. So yeah, I did not record the intro music. Zach is right. Maybe if I have a little bit of extra time on my hands, we can re-record it. For next time. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't have that much time on my hands, and I'm not sure what the copyright infringement looks like on something like that. So,
fair enough. Next comment is one that I'm kind of excited about because it may or may not lead to a very long Spurgeon Zack argument or discussion.
This is from. Do you want to tell what the episode is from first?
Maybe I should. I think that's right. So this is from episode 2. Of season 5, where we covered the ugliest and most beautiful bikes of all time. Heath wrote in a question that says, why do we say inline 4 and not parallel 4? Why do we say parallel twin and not inline 2? When referring to an engine configuration of a motorcycle. So like Yamaha MT-07, we often say parallel twin. But Suzuki GSX-R 1000, we would say inline 4, not parallel 4.
What would you say for a triple?
Usually inline triple, right?
Yeah. I think that'd be.
But there have been V3s. There've been like not a V twin, but like a V. It's a V, but it's a triple.
A V5.
and a V5, right? The Honda, famously
And
Honda MotoGP
what's
bike.
the example that you gave us the other day?
My example, and maybe you won't agree with this, Highside, Lowside audience, I'm not sure, but my example was the Ariel Square 4, which has 2 crankshafts, I believe, or a Suzuki RG500, I think is a 2-stroke from the 80s, and also 2 crankshafts, and it's a square 4, so it's 4 pistons that are, it's 2 parallel twins next to each other front to back, if you can imagine that. So they're kind of parallel. It's still a parallel 4, kind of, because all 4 of the pistons are parallel with another one, but it's not in line. So I think maybe that's where that came from, because the Ariel Square 4 is a bike from, I don't know, the 50s
Long
or
time
60s.
ago.
Something.
Back when
Lance was
Lance
in short
Oliver
pants.
was
Exactly. And the Suzuki RG500 is more recent than that. It's in the 80s, I think. But anyway, could that be the reason? I mean, that makes sense, right? It's technically a parallel 4.
I think if you have an inline 4,
maybe not.
Like an inline 4 is not parallel. It's straight in a line. There's nothing next to it, so it wouldn't be a parallel 4.
But I mean, Heath makes a good point. All the cylinders are in parallel, right? They're parallel to each other.
I think no, because a parallel to me has you like, if I'm and trust me, I'm going back to my geometry lessons here. So fun fact, when I was in college, my geometry professor was a motorcycle. She was from Germany. She would roll her own cigarettes, and she would ride her motorcycle.
She was a motorcyclist.
She was a motorcyclist. Yeah.
Okay.
What did I say?
Wait, you said she was a motorcycle, which would have been a lot more exciting.
She rode a motorcycle. She rode a motorcycle in class. So we would bond, and she often referred to geometry as just having to learn pretty shapes, because like we were a low level geometry class, so she had to like water it down for us. But if I remember back to geometry, if you have a single point, you have to have a line for a parallel. Like you have to have an actual line. So the parallel 4 wouldn't work because the cylinders form a line, but then there's not another bank of cylinders. So in theory, a square 4 could actually be a parallel 4 in the fact that you have two lines that are parallel with one another. But the way that I see it, but then again, that wouldn't explain a parallel twin. So my rationale is all over the place.
The parallel twin, I think the suggestion is that the cylinder bores each cylinder bore is parallel to the other. You know, the
so
cylinder
the
bore.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
They're parallel to each other. And to Heath's point, in an inline 4, all the cylinders are parallel to each other as well, in the same way as. So you know, I think to get down to it,
it's just
inline
the way
4,
it is. All right, Heath. So let's just leave it alone.
But inline 4, I think, is a little bit more descriptive, right? If the cylinders are all in line, then there's only really one configuration they can be. Whereas if the cylinder bores were all parallel, you could technically have a square 4 in which all of the cylinders are parallel, but they're not in line. So, and obviously we call it a square 4 because for obvious reasons, and it makes sense. I think that square 4 is more descriptive and inline 4 is more descriptive, whereas parallel 4, to your point, Heath, is not wrong, but it leaves more to interpretation, and maybe that's why they didn't do it.
Well,
whoever came up with this.
Now that we've thoroughly confused one another,
now that we've established that Spurgeon lost his virginity to his geometry teacher, because you said you bonded with her, which I assume is what that means.
That is not how I got an A in that class. Okay. I studied and I put my nose to the grindstone. No, she was just rad. It was. I'm trying to remember what her name was. I want to say Anka. She was from Germany, but she was rad, and she would come out and she would like drink with us after like finals and stuff, and she was cool. So,
you said this was in high school?
No, college.
In college, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, she wasn't rolling her own cigarettes in high school. We had I wasn't Lance Oliver's age.
Anyway, that was fun. Good comment, Heath. I like it. I don't know if you learned anything or anyone else did, but I had fun talking about it.
So the next one comes from our Packing Tips for Motorcycle Trips season 5, episode 6 of season 5, and this is Scott. And Scott wrote in because we talked about having a plug kit with us on the trip and making sure you could change your tire. Scott wrote in and said there was a suggestion that you should practice plugging a tire without drilling a hole in the tire to practice this. How is this practice done?
The short answer is you drill a hole in your tire, right?
Well, there's two things here. So essentially what I was referring to when I said this, because I believe I was the one that said this and then Ari kind of jumped in, was not you should practice plugging a tire, which you should. If you don't know how to plug a tire, you can always get an old tire, like a takeoff tire from a junkyard, and practice on that. But what I was referring to was practicing replacing a tube. So for anyone out there that's using a spoked wheel that still has a tube, or if you're riding an adventure bike that still has a tube, a lot of what I've experienced is that people on the trail, one, don't know how to take the wheel off using their tools that they have with them. And then two, once they do take the wheel off, they have no idea how to replace a tube because it is antiquated technology if we're coming from the automotive world. So to learn how to put a patch kit or a plug in a tire is a little bit easier than learning how to replace a tube. So for me, for you, Scott, I was referring to practicing taking the tire off, putting a new tube in, and then putting it back together. For that, you wouldn't have to damage your tire. You would just have to replace the tube.
But to be clear, Scott, was it Scott?
Scott,
yeah,
yes.
Scott. You should get, if you have a tire that's worn out and you're changing it anyway, that's a good time to practice that. Or like Spurge said, if you can get a scrap tire from your local shop or junkyard or something like that, that's a good way to do it too. And yeah, just punch a hole in a tire, and punch a hole in a tire that's no good, obviously. But it's a good way to do it. And it's especially good, like, to do it on your, if you have a rear tire that's, shagged and you're kind of done with it. Before you take it off your bike, just run a sheetrock screw into the tire and punch a hole in it. And then use your rope plug kit or whatever plug kit you have to bore out the hole and put a rope in there and patch it. It's a good excuse to practice.
Ari Henning recently plugged a Goldwing tire that had a giant hole in the back. Do you remember this? Do you remember his Instagram story where he had to put he ended up putting like seven plugs in it and doing a burnout to like melt the plugs into the tire?
Yeah. That was a sketchy plug situation because it was a big gash in the tire. But we have a Gixxus 1000 GT testing right now that I loaned to Ari for a little errand road trip thing he was doing, and it had a hole in the it had a screw in the front tire when he took it to his house. So that's my bad. But he just put a plug in that tire and we kept riding it. Our West Coast van I found a screw in the tire of that the other day and I put a rope in it.
Oh, is that why the pressure kept dropping?
No, separate issue.
Okay.
But anyway, the point is we use them all the time and they're easy to use and it's good to practice doing that. So either practice taking your tire off, as Spurge said, or yes, find a junk tire in one way or another and punch a hole in it just to do it.
But to be clear, with what I was referring to was, again, with the tubes, and you don't need to ruin your tire for that. So you can practice that over and over again without ruining your tire.
Correct. Moving on. The next... I'm going to have to read ahead here. I don't remember. What is this?
While you read ahead, I'll tell you the episode. So this is from episode 5 of season 5, and this is the Moto Spectacles. Spectacular? I can't read Chase's handwriting. Our producer scribbled this down. This is the this is the off-road spectacles in off-road racing.
Right. So basically, like, what's the coolest stuff to watch if you're going to watch off-road racing? And we talked briefly about e-racing, I think, because you can watch people play video games in this day and age. And Cyborg wrote in and said, I can appreciate the host's attempt to try and remain open-minded and neutral on the subject matter, but how they truly feel about esports. I screwed up reading. Let me back up. Cyborg says, I can appreciate the host trying to be open-minded on the subject matter of how they truly feel about esports racing and sim games, but the contempt is so palpable you can almost taste how boomed out these two are. So basically, Cyborg called us old boomer hacks who can't understand the way of the kids these days. And
for what it's worth, do you know what I did over Christmas? Do you know what I did?
Did you watch people play video games?
No, I pulled out my old Sega Genesis. I put in Road Rash 2, and I taught my nephew what real video games were really like back in the day. So I don't think that's doing anything but supporting Cyborg's argument that, like, I'm probably not the modern day audience for some of these modern video games. But Zach, you are. You're an avid aficionado of video games, are you not?
I don't know if I'm an aficionado. I like video games and I do play them. I struggle with this comment a little bit. I think it's funny that Cyborg says we're boomed out, like, basically calling us crotchety old dudes, which is funny to me. The thing that I took away from Cyborg's comment is that Cyborg appreciated that we did try to stay neutral. We provided both sides of the story. In my heart of hearts, yes, I have contempt for video game players being on the same podium at the 24-hour of Le Mans with the drivers that actually drove for 24 hours at hundreds of miles an hour. I do not think they're the same. They deserve the same level of respect.
They're not the same caliber. No.
Exactly. And that's how I feel. However, I understand it's popular and I understand that people enjoy it. And I think racing video games are friggin' awesome. And
so the flip side of this was the next comment where, again, in reference to the same episode, there was another comment that said, "Gentlemen, best episode of Highside Lowside ever. It's about time one of you UZ YouTubers brought up the chopper craze of the." Oh wait, was this a different episode then?
Yeah, this was the Moto Industry. This is from Moto Industry's Biggest Blunders, American edition, and this person wrote in and said, "It's about time use YouTubers brought up the chopper craze of the late '90s and early 2000s, but you're stinking millennials, and you don't get American pride. We're Americans. At that time, choppers were cool. They were loud, fire-breathing monstrosities that were the envy of the world." So the reason that producer Chase put these next to each other is that one person called us boomers and one person called us millennials, and
we can't win. I think the real story here is depending on how old,
right.
Yeah, depending on how old you are depends on your view of how old Zack and I are. I think that's
Correct.
really the story here.
That's the bottom line.
So Cyborg is 12. And this other comment,
exactly.
The person's at least 75. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's all about perspective there, and we disagree with both of these comments. The person saying that that the chopper craze of the late '90s and early 2000s was ever cool, and the person who says.
They didn't just say that, but they said at the time choppers were cool. They were loud, fire-breathing monstrosities that were the envy of the world.
They did say that.
I can't imagine that is true at all. They weren't the envy of most people in America, let alone the world.
Well, they were popular. They were undeniably popular, whether it was on TV or at bike nights or whatever, and they sold for $100,000, and that's all well and good. But it's hard to think that people in Japan and Australia and Europe and wherever else in the world weren't looking at us thinking, "What are you doing?" Right?
Well, I can't imagine some, sport bike aficionado in Europe with their actual fire-breathing fast machine was looking at a chopper being like, "Man, that thing really speaks to me from a speed perspective." Fire-breathing monstrosities makes me think of like fast, exciting.
Right.
And
well,
they
anyway,
weren't that.
We should move on, but to Cyborg and to Jose, thank you for your comments. We do disagree with you. All right, but we appreciate that you disagree with us, and that's okay.
I mean,
we're all welcome in the Highside Lowside community.
In fairness, I think we are millennials, though.
We are, yes.
I think we're
Jose
the
is
elder.
correct there.
We are the elder millennials.
We are, yes.
All right, move along.
So next comment came in via email in reference to no episode in particular, to be honest. It reads, "Good day, Messieurs Spurgeon and Courts." That's actually kind of odd. I used your first name and my last name.
They think it's my last name. That's what I'm guessing that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What if your name was Dunbar Spurgeon? That's actually not a bad name either.
The weird world we live in, but yeah, I've gotten that from a lot of people. Most people think Spurgeon is my last name.
Yeah, that's fair. Greetings from South Africa is the point. This comes in from Miklun, who says, "I'm a new motorcyclist and after about a week and a half managed to have the same non-life-threatening accident twice within 4 days. Parentheses, I drove my sidecar wheel arch into a pillar in a parking structure and later into a parked car." So, Miklun is a new motorcyclist who, for reasons we are not clear on, got a sidecar. And then ran it into something twice in 4 days.
I mean, sidecars are fun and cool, so I can understand why he did it. But yeah,
we'll get to that. Miklun asks, "Is this grounds for re-examining my new method of transport, or merely an expensive lesson in a new endeavor?" And there's a second question which we'll get to in a minute. But the first sort of nucleus of this is basically, should I get a different vehicle, or is this just what happens when you start riding sidecars, that you run into things? And there's a lot to unpack here.
You had the same accident twice in a week. Like,
I think the second accident just happened because there hadn't been enough time to learn the lesson. I don't know. I think here's the thing. If you're riding a sidecar and you are not pretty much constantly re-examining your method of transportation, you're probably doing it wrong. In other words, sidecars are a questionable way to get around. They are a little bit sketchy as vehicles. They are cool. They are fun. I love sidecars. I have a long history with sidecars. Lots of people who listen to Highside, Lowside know this, but they are tricky to drive and a little bit unwieldy in general.
Hang on. Time out. So the problem is that he hit a pillar in a parking structure and then a parked car with the sidecar car is what I'm reading about this.
Presumably, yeah.
But like, it's no wider than an automobile. So like, has McClone never driven in a car before? Because like, I just picture like, unless in South Africa, all the driver seats are plumb in the middle and you have equal distance on both sides. Like, it's
everybody drives a McLaren F1.
Yeah, it's the same concept as far as like, you just have to equate for an extra 4 feet on your right, and like you're going to be fine.
Yeah, this is fair. But maybe, you're sitting on a motorcycle. You're riding a motorcycle when you're doing it. So it's easy to forget that you have all that vehicle to your right. I think I can understand where the confusion comes from. It's tricky. The point is, I wouldn't give up, McLuhan. My answer to your question is, this is an expensive lesson in a new endeavor, and it's okay. Just try to, if you keep on hitting stuff, eventually, you got to just call it quits. You got to just like only ride a motorcycle without a sidecar, or only drive a car, or do whatever you have to do to keep yourself safe, because obviously it's not for you. But for now, I think just stick with it. That's my
okay. So the second question is for you, Zach, and I'll read it to you. So
yes.
he had a part 2 to his question, and he goes, now primarily for you, Zach, because you are the sidecar racing expert between the two of us. What tips do you have for a new street-based sidecar rider? Primarily talking about himself or herself. Yep. Also, what should the sidecar wheel tire pressure be in relation to the other two wheels?
Yes. The first question, tips on new street-based sidecar driver. We sort of already covered that. They're sketchy vehicles. Be careful. Take it easy. Don't do the things you see on YouTube. I don't know. It go slowly. Try not to hit pillars in parking garages. I don't have a lot of like super specific advice, except that they are unwieldy vehicles, as I said. So just stay focused there.
Watch out for Oldsmobiles.
Exactly. As far as what the tire pressure should be in the sidecar tire, it doesn't matter that much. You can approximately how much tire pressure goes in a wheel of that size anyway. So like if you probably have 35, 38 pounds in the motorcycle wheels, and something like that's totally acceptable for the sidecar wheel as well. Some people say run a little bit less. It depends how much load is in there. It's just the same as a pickup truck, right? Like if you got load back there, you want more air in the rear tires. So keep that in mind. It also depends a little bit. I don't know what kind of sidecar you have, but if you have a Ural that is 2-wheel drive, so it's a pusher wheel in the sidecar, then that can have an effect on it, and you'll want the tire pressure to match more closely with the drive wheel of the motorcycle. So there's a lot of variables there, but basically, if all your tire pressures of the 3 wheels are approximately the same, you should be fine.
But you're saying if he has more junk in his trunk, he's going to have to pay more attention to that.
Moving on to comment number or whatever this is. This is
comment number 6.
Right. Came from Essential Packing Tips for Motorcycle Trips. That was season 5, episode 6. I'm going to read this one because I think it's hilarious. It came from Cynthia, who says, thanks, Spurge, for the denture clean tablet hack. 20 tabs for $1.25. No more funk for my hydration pack, and it smells like grandma's kisses.
There you go. So Cynthia is referring to in our season 5, episode 6, where we talked about different ideas for packing and traveling. We talked about the fact that we like to use hydration packs while we ride to keep ourselves well hydrated. Ari is apparently a heathen who never actually cleans out his hydration pack. But I do regularly clean my hydration pack, and I learned a while ago that if you go down to like a CVS or a local drugstore, you can get a giant box of denture cleaner for like $10 for like 300 tablets, as opposed to going to like an REI where
20
you have
tabs
to spend
for
like
$1.25, according to Cynthia.
no. If you go to like REI, it's like 20 tabs cost you like $20. So
I know. I'm saying she's agreeing with you.
yes.
that
So I'm
they're
just
cheap if you-
explaining the tip for people that haven't listened to the previous episode. So for those of you
Well,
out
if
there
they
looking
haven't
to
listened
clean
to the previous episode, then they can do that.
I'm bringing people back around for the explanation. Settle yourself down. What are you drinking in that thermos over there?
Pure caffeine.
Are you drinking
Ready
caffeine?
to move on.
again, aren't
Next
you?
question.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Cynthia, thank you for trying out the tip. I'm glad that it worked out for you. I'm glad that your hydration pack now smells like your grandmother.
Yes. It was one of the most fun comments we read in our review for this episode, Cynthia. One of the best sentences we read was, "No more funk from my hydration pack, and it smells like grandma's kisses." Hilarious.
There you go.
Next comment is from Claudio. This was also in regards to packing tips for motorcycle trips. Claudio basically said, I think you guys should do a whole episode on food or meetings or strange situations from your trips, especially solo trips. We're not sure if we're going to do a whole episode on that, but we did want to address it and each tell a story. Does something come to mind for you, Spurge?
Well, I mean, I feel like I already told the story about the guy that pulled the shotgun on me. And I feel like that was probably one of the stranger things that happened on a solo trip. I will say the other thing that happened, similar trip, the night before the shotgun, I was coming through Lake Tahoe area, and I saw a light behind me. It was probably like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and there was like a single headlight. And typically in that area, the only time that there's a single headlight would have been a motorcycle patrol police officer pulling me over. So I kind of slowed down because I was going a little bit fast, and I pulled into a gas station, and in next to me pulled a gentleman on a R1200 HP2 GS. Now, if you remember, this was like the hyped up dirt bike version with the boxer engine, the HP2 at the time.
So it was the oil head, but it had a 21-inch front wheel, and it was like a little bit more dirt oriented, right?
And it was thrashed to hell, covered in dirt, covered in mud. The dude had a big extra headlight on it. And we started talking, and he was like, yeah, like, you're not technically allowed to ride some of the trails out here. So I go out at night, and I ride the trails at night on my big GS. And at the time, I was a broke high school teacher, and I remember being like, man, that's a really expensive motorcycle to go out and thrash around. And he goes, well, the way that I see it is that the more expensive the motorcycle, the more abuse it should be able to take. And this one takes a lot of abuse. So I thought that's something that I stole and I use to this day, and I justify for my expensive motorcycle purchases. But we ended up talking. I was on a cross-country trip, and he took me out to dinner. He bought me dinner, offered me a place to crash. I turned him down, and I went and slept in a parking lot behind a hotel and got a gun pulled on me. So my point is if you meet a kind stranger that buys you a hamburger, you probably better off sleeping on their floor than a stranger's back alleyway.
That's a great. I love that. I don't think I've never heard that story. I'm learning Spurgeon Dunbar backstory here in this episode of Highside Lowside. So I appreciate it, and I don't know what to follow that up with. I don't know if can you think of any stories that I have that are any good? I don't think I have any.
You don't have any good solo trip stories where you've been out doing something by yourself and something's happened?
Not really. So for some reason, these two stories, which I think are related, my mind flashed into my head. At one point I was riding, I had a pair of CD, God, I don't remember the name, but they were the CD road race boots that have all the buckles all over them. And like, they're very kind of like, there's pucks and buckles, and they're like highfalutin, Vortice or something like that. Does that sound familiar?
Okay.
Anyway,
maybe
they were white, and I had white road racing boots because of, I think I had like leathers that had white on them, and so they matched. But at the time, I was wearing these boots as street boots because I was a broke college student or something like that, and I just had these boots left over from road racing. So I was like, I'm just gonna rock these. And I was riding along the freeway, and it was kind of trafficky, and these two girls in like an SUV or something like that were like rolling next to me, and they were like looking at me, and they were like smiling and pointing, and and which was obviously very exciting because I rarely have the attention of any women. And I come to find out they were pointing at my boots, and they were like, "That guy's wearing white boots." They were like basically making fun of me. I think, I don't know. And eventually I figured out what they were talking about, and I sort of like pointed to the boots, and they were like nodding and laughing and smiling, and they were like, "Oh man, like white boots." And I was like, whatever, haters gonna hate if you want to, but I'll rock white boots if I want to. And it reminded me of a situation when years earlier when I was walking around Boston with my cousins who were in town or something like that, and we were in some store, and there was a girl in there wearing motorcycle boots, similar boots, like they have road race boots, like white, the buckles on them and like chrome, and like they're very clearly motorcycle road racing boots. And I don't remember if it was because I was single at the time or I was just bored in the store or whatever, but I walked up to the girl and I said, like, do you ride motorcycles? And she was just, it was like I asked her if she was, Bill Clinton's daughter or something. She was just like, "What are you talking about? No, I'm not. I don't ride motorcycles.
I've never even met Chelsea."
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, and eventually I got to the point of the story is I got to the boot, and I was like, "The boots you're wearing but those are motorcycle boots, aren't they?" And she looked at me, and I don't think I'll ever forget this. She said, "They're Chanel." And it turns out.
So do you think that the women were
boots?
They were laughing at you because they thought you were wearing Chanel boots?
Exactly. I don't know. They either thought I was wearing Chanel boots or they just thought I was. Anyway, the point is Chanel made a pair of boots, like fashion boots. I don't know what to call them. They were mocked after road racing boots. They actually looked like that. And this girl was horrified that I thought she rode a motorcycle because I didn't recognize that she was wearing Chanel.
There's a really good Peter Egan article where he talks about the history of a leather jacket, and he talks about how back in the 60s and 70s, you only wore a leather jacket if you rode a motorcycle, and how as culture and time shifted and changed, people would wear leather jackets for style. And during this culture shift in time, he had gone up to somebody in like a grocery store or something like that was wearing a motorcycle jacket and was like, "Hey, what bike do you ride?" And the person said the same thing, like started and was like, "What are you talking about?"
Right. And they're like, "I got this at a vintage shop in Brooklyn, buddy. Leave me alone."
And he was like, there was a time and place where you would have never worn a motorcycle jacket outside of riding a motorcycle, but now it's all about style. And Chanel gets it, They're stealing your style, Zach.
So the only quick follow-up I have there. Oh, producer Chase just sent us he just followed up with the boots that I saw this girl wear.
Dude, these are amazing. So I'm sure Bernie can pull it up.
Yeah. We'll get them on screen for those of you watching on YouTube. But they are very clearly motorcycle boots as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure if these are the exact ones, but the point is
$4,000 used.
Right. So anyway, that's not really that fun a motorcycle story, but it's the one that flashed into my head, and I thought it was hilarious. And I think that my bemusement is validated by the fact that Peter Egan wrote an article about something similar. So I guess.
Well, I have a new financial endeavor at this point. I'm going to take all my used road racing boots out of the basement, sell them on grailed.com as like style pieces for 3 times, 4 times, 5 times what they're worth. So
right.
Man.
Well, speaking of the ugliest and most beautiful motorcycle racing boots of all time, the next comment comes in from Alberto in reference to the ugliest and most beautiful bikes of all time episode. That was episode 2 this season. Alberto says, I don't know why people forget about the Suzuki S40 or Savage. Great beginner's bike, lightweight, torquey, low seat, easy maintenance, and cheap. Suzuki already stopped producing it, but there are lots of those here ready for a new small rider. So this is not terrible advice in general. However, it is in relation to the best and worst looking motorcycles of all time. So where do you think the Savage fits in there, Spurge?
I don't know where Alberto feels that it fits in, but I feel it's probably one of the uglier bikes of all time. What I will say is there was a company for a while, and I forget the name of it. There was a company for a while that was building cafe kits for these, and you would take them and you would chop them up, and then they looked really cool.
I think it was Ryka, R-Y-C-A.
There you go. Yeah. That sounds very familiar. Right? Yeah, that sounds familiar. But what I would say is that like the problem here with the Suzuki Savage, yes, they were lightweight, they were approachable, they were dependable, but it was also a giant 650 single cylinder thumper that just it kind of I don't know. It wasn't a really endearing engine in my opinion. I think there were better.
It did have the potential to shake your feelings loose, certainly.
Yes.
Are you drinking a White Russian?
Don't worry about what I'm drinking. It's after noon here, so it's
No wonder our energy levels are different.
2:12 in the afternoon where I am.
All right. The next comment. So did we cover the Savage? Alberto's right. The Savage is not a bad beginner bike. We don't love it because we hate cruisers. Is that right, Spurgeon? Is that technically the line that we're towing?
Stop it. Absolutely not. I'm going to stop you from doing this for like 3 episodes in a row. I would just say that the comment was on the ugliest, prettiest bikes, and I don't think the Suzuki Savage is. I don't know. It's not horribly pretty and it's not horribly ugly. It's just kind of generic in my mind. So frankly, I just don't think it really had a place on that episode, unless we're wrong and this came in on one of the beginner bike episodes. But again, this was from what producer Chase is telling us. This was a comment that was an ugliest and prettiest bikes, and I'm not going to call producer Chase a liar. So
no, you can't do it. You just can't.
But before we move on, we should get in a word from our sponsor Motul, because we've got plenty of comments to go, and frankly, I think people want to hear a fun Motul ad before we go any further.
Okie dokie. We can all agree that was a lovely commercial break, I think.
I mean, whoever does those commercials really has the voice of an angel.
Comment number 9 is from Ashton. That's right, Ashton.
Kutcher?
Calling you out. Perhaps.
Do you think it is?
Ashton says, I own a 2020 Yamaha MT-03. That is a small parallel twin. For those of you who know your motorcycles. It has about 2,500 miles on it, if that matters. Spoiler alert, it does not. Not even sure why I read that. Ashton says, I would like to put a new exhaust system to make it a bit louder, but a friend said I'd also have to get the bike tuned for that exhaust system, or I'd blow my engine or top end. My question is that true?
I think, Ashton, the number one piece of advice I have for you is you need to find some new friends. Your friend's a liar. And maybe they work at an online retailer where they're just trying to get you to buy something.
Right, yeah. Does your friend work at RevZilla?
Yeah.
Like, no, you need a power commander, and you also need some swing arm spools, and you also need a new chain, and...
You'll blow up your engine's top end. So long story short here, Ashton, is that is not necessarily the case here. Now, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to like eke out a ton of power, putting an exhaust on your bike will not do that by itself. And there are definitely some cases where if you're putting on a full system exhaust, there is some recommendations for having a bike that is retuned with different fueling and then also different air intake. But in most cases, if you're just putting a slip-on exhaust on, you can do that without having to worry about fueling. And in fact, if you're looking at the exhaust in question, it'll tell you whether or not it requires any kind of fuel modification before it starts to have performance problems. And it's not that it's going to necessarily blow up your top end, but sometimes if you put on an exhaust and you don't change the fueling or the air, it doesn't run as optimally as it could, and you actually can end up losing power, losing feel, losing bottom end because it's not optimized.
Sure. And much more broadly, maybe you don't want this advice, Ashton, or other people are going to be mad at me, but just think it through, making your bike louder. I don't know. It's having a loud bike is fine. It's fine. It can be fun, but I think there's a tasteful way to do it and there's an obnoxious way to do it. And I just keep that in mind. I think start small with your loudness modification would be my advice.
I feel like
also don't make an MT-03 louder because no one needs to hear that.
Because I feel like for all the aggressive Spurgeon Dunbar voices that you get to do, mocking me, I feel like I need to come up with like a nerdy, like, hi guys, I'm Zack, and I'm pushing my glasses back, and I don't think that you should make your exhaust any louder. Now, despite the fact that I've got a dual Akrapovic exhaust system on my KTM, what I want to tell you is that like I think that you should not do the same. So, but I got to work on that. I'm not quite there yet.
Not yet. But I think it needs some work, but I think it's good, and I think that aspect of my personality certainly could be made fun of. So,
long story short, Ashton, I don't know if you need an exhaust on your MT-03. I'm going to agree with my colleague there, but what I will say is that you can also, you're not going to hurt your top end, but you can possibly do some performance damage from just the feel of the engine. That's a lovable little engine, and if you start messing around with the exhaust and then you're not planning on changing intake or fueling, you might actually find that you're hindering your performance a little bit. And again, this is all very dependent on the exhaust that you're putting on there too. So make sure to just check with the manufacturer of the exhaust as to what they recommend for you.
Yeah. Where your friend, to button this up, where your friend got that information is that it is possible to screw with a tune of a motorcycle to such an extent that it will ruin the engine. It's possible to do that.
Yes.
But it is just very unlikely that you would purchase like an Aero exhaust or a Yoshimura exhaust or something like that for an MT-03 and it would just like destroy it. That's almost certainly not going to happen.
Almost certainly. That's how we cover our asses when the lawyers come to us and say, did you recommend to some guy, Ashton, to put an exhaust on his bike and not tune it? Turns out his friend was correct. Plot twist that we didn't see coming. Anyway, Ashton, we feel like we've thoroughly kind of answered your question there. So let's move along to comment 10 from Jim, who wrote in via email to say, this may be a can of worms, but with some of the newer fuels on the market right now, like 88 octane and others like 89 octane, seemingly becoming more scarce, what fuel types are okay to use versus OEM recommendations? First of all, where do you live in the country where 89 octane is becoming an issue to find? That's another question for another day. However, Jim says my 1250 GS recommends 89 octane, but says that 87 octane is a suitable alternative. If I have to use 87 octane more often, should I consider a fuel additive? And what is your opinion on fuel additives in general?
Jim's got questions. Let me tell you, Jim has got questions.
Who's got the answer, Zach?
Ari Henning is who has the answers, actually. Ari Henning did an episode of the shop manual called Octane Explained, I believe. The title might have been longer than that. It might be like, should you run premium fuel in your bike, Octane Explained, or something like that. Anyway, go and watch that video because it will explain what octane is, what it does, why you need it, why you don't, and all of your dreams will come true if you just watch Ari Henning's show. But another thing I'd like to follow up on there is that your 1250 GS probably has a sensor in the engine.
What's the sensor called?
Who's there?
Knock knock. Oh,
yeah. Hey-o. So
knock sensor, guys. Knock sensor.
A knock sensor is something that more advanced engines have, and they will. It basically allows the engine to read how the combustion is taking place in the engine, and it will remap and it will reassess and it will retune itself to a certain extent. I believe
it affects the timing, correct? Like it can advance or retard the timing based on where the ignition is happening.
Yeah, and that's probably easier to do. I'm getting at the border of my. I'm at the fringe of my knowledge of the subject, but it's probably easier to do with something like an R1250 GS because it has variable valve timing, so that engine can make particularly vast and comprehensive adjustments to the timing. And
you heard it here first, folks. Go watch the shop manual because as you can see, Zach and I are just yeah.
And as far as opinion on fuel additives, I don't know. Do you have an opinion, Spurgeon? I don't think I have an opinion. I understand that it's not just snake oil, right? I think they work to a certain extent, but I think that Ari also covers that in the episode of the shop manual. So I would leave that to him as well.
But long story short, Jim, I wouldn't be losing too much sleep over this. I mean,
especially not with a 1250 GS, which you can probably run on.
Anyone out there that has questions on octane, Ari covered it in a great episode. But again, I think the long story short, too long didn't read, is that you're going to be just fine with 87 octane. I mean, if you get into Mexico and you're running 80 octane, write us another email. We'll talk. But I think for right now, you're going to be fine.
On the subject of high octane, the next email is from Raphael, who said, based on the constant reminding during Highside Lowside that Spurgeon's dad says the V-Strom is an excellent bike, and after a positive review on Daily Rider by Zack, I am now the proud owner of a V-Strom 1050 XT, and so far I love it.
How did we have 2 V-Strom comments in one episode? I feel like our producer, Chase, didn't do a good job of cutting one of these out, because now we've got 2 people raving accolades about the Suzuki V-Strom. And the other problem that I have with this is people listening to the podcast, all 4 of them, are going to be like, well, Suzuki V-Strom must be a good bike because Spurgeon's dad likes it, Zack likes it, and now Raphael likes it. On top of other, who is the person this morning or this morning? That's how long we've been podcasting. Who was the commenter earlier that liked the V-Strom as well? I'm going through my notes. I can't see it.
I don't remember. I don't actually remember that. I think you might be drunk on your White Russian.
No, I'm halfway there. Little Goliath. Little Goliath was our winner for the T-shirt. Talked about discovering that a V-Strom is one heck of a great machine as well. So Little Goliath.
Oh, you're right.
Raphael, okay. My dad, Zack. When will the madness end?
To be clear, I gave it a positive review on Daily Rider because if you want a bike for commuting, it's not a bad choice. It doesn't really do anything wrong, but it's not. It's not at the top of the Daily Rider leaderboard. Let's put it that way. And it's certainly not at the top of the list of bikes that I find exciting. But Raphael, to speak directly to you, I don't think you made a bad choice.
I think that, so, and again, just to kind of clarify some of the comments that I made earlier.
You sound like a politician now.
I'm gonna get really diplomatic here. My problems with the Suzuki V-Strom are the fact that it paints itself in a certain light that it can't necessarily deliver on, and also, there's just a bit of antiquated technology with that particular motorcycle. It's a fine bike. You want to hop on the road, you want to cruise the Vista. It's great. I think that
cruise the Vista.
I think that like my issue is just when I think of an adventure bike, I think a little bit lighter, a little bit more off-road capable. There was an article, and I don't remember.
Spurgeon Dunbar needs cone valve suspension, needs 10 inches, got to jump stuff, got to run over things.
Yeah, you're definitely better with that than I am with the. Hi, I'm Zack Quartz, and today we're going to talk about why you don't need an aftermarket exhaust on your motorcycle.
Maybe someday we'll do a whole podcast of just those 2 people.
So, Drew, I don't know if we talked about it on the Highside, Lowside, but remember the article we found where the company was taking the Suzuki, the V-Strom 1050 XTs and was building them into rally bikes?
Yes.
Did we talk about that on Highside, Lowside?
I think that was a common tread meeting, but it's all, my life is a blur. The point is, it has been done, and they look rad.
Those look cool. So there is hope and potential for all you Suzuki V-Strom 1050 XT owners out there.
But to be clear, Raphael, you don't need to jump it over stuff. If
I think you should, Raphael. What I'm saying is,
okay,
I think you should write us back in a year from now after you've modified the hell out of it with cone valve suspension and a whole bunch of other goodies, and you can talk about how you've rally raced it against Ryan Fortnite up in Canada, and the 2 of you went head-to-head on your V-Stroms, and it was a great time for both of you.
Okay. So to pivot from
it's a
one
fun
person
afternoon at this point. I'm just letting you know that we've got like another hour to go, so you're in for a treat,
sure, yeah.
audience.
Pivoting from someone who liked our bike advice to someone who did not like our bike advice, this message came in from Adrian with regard to the Moto dating game for beginners. That was season 5, episode 3. Adrian's note, at least in edited form, starts with, I disagree. Adrian says, the Busa has for decades been the go-to sport bike for larger folk. So this is, sorry, to back up a little bit, in reference to our talking down the Suzuki Hayabusa as not a great bike for beginners.
And
we may have said some other stuff too. Yeah. Anyway, Adrian goes on to say there aren't many options in this segment for quote-unquote larger folk. Honda Blackbird, Kawasaki Ninja ZX12, ZX14, Suzuki TLR. The Busa has a large cult-like following and is also many people's favorite bike. It's the perfect starting platform for anyone interested in chasing land speed records, for example. Spurgeon, would you like to reply to Adrian?
The last sentence completely negates its use as a beginner motorcycle. What I would say is, Zack, in 30 seconds or less, for those of us joining us for the first time, what is a Suzuki Hayabusa, otherwise referred to as the Busa?
A Suzuki Hayabusa is a sport bike from Suzuki that I believe debuted in 1999. It is 1,300 cc's in its engine displacement. It makes many horsepower. Turbocharged, they make 300, 400 horsepower. They are often used as and cited as the highest performance sport bike as far as acceleration goes. They're very fast.
So again, not a beginner motorcycle. And I think Adrian makes the point here of a Blackbird Ninja 1200, a Ninja ZX12 or ZX14 or a Suzuki. I'm assuming that's a TL Suzuki.
Yes, TLR. Yeah.
Those aren't beginner bikes either. Like,
So I'd like to address a couple things. One, I will admit I did say something like, I can't believe they sell Hayabusas to people, which suggests that I don't think it's a good bike. But I did also say in that episode that it's a cool bike. I think that the Hayabusa is rad. I just think that it's kind of killing an ant with a sledgehammer for a lot of people. And to get to
you
the
prefer
point of
to kill
Adrian's
your
email,
ants with gasoline in a match, right? Like, if you're going to go out and kill some ants, like, it's not a sledgehammer
glass
for
or something.
you.
I don't know. Anyway, Adrian makes the point that that for larger riders, people who feel like they are just too big for many motorcycles, something like a Hayabusa can work well because it's a big, long, heavy motorcycle and it has plenty of power. And I think that's valid. We just would like to be very clear that we don't recommend it in any beginner sense. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
You disagree with Adrian's?
Let's just leave it at that. I mean, I just think
it has a cult-like following. You're right. It's good for land speed records. You're right. It's not good for beginners. We are right.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it. And I think we can leave it at that, because the last thing I want to do is really pick a fight with all the Hayabusa owners out there, which I feel like based on some of the other comments we've already done that. But yeah, it's the whole point in this, whether we personally like it for ourselves as not beginners. The point that we just wanted to drive home was, I don't care how big you are, the Hayabusa is not a beginner motorcycle. Right. That's my thought.
Moving on to another disagreeing listener. This email comes in from Rick with regard to, should you modify your cruiser, and if so, when? That was episode 8 with our friend Patrick Garvin.
This is Rick's first time disagreeing with you, Zach.
Sounds like it. Rick says, first time disagreeing with Mr. Quartz. The magnetic tank bags tend to scratch, not only to me, but other friends who have used them. Gas cap mounted tank bags, much better. Spurgeon?
So
thoughts?
I talked about this in one of the episodes, right? Like, I think I talked about this in motorcycle trips episode, because I had the issue where I used I set my magnetic tank bag down on my workbench, and it picked up a beer cap, and I put the magnetic tank bag down on my Triumph tank, and the trip came to an end, and I took the tank bag off, and I had etched a perfect beer cap size circle into the finish on my tank, which it's still there to this day. It's character on a bike with 80,000 miles.
Your bike got a little beer cap tattoo. Very appropriate.
Yeah. But what I would say is that I disagree with you, Rick, in the fact that I find magnetic tank bags to still be more convenient to use than the ones that mount to a gas cap, specifically because it's just easy to move it from one bike to the next. I can put it on a press bike. I can put it on my friend's bike if I'm riding a different bike. And you're right in the fact that it does, if you don't keep the bottoms cleaned, it can cause scratches in a clear coat. And if you are not careful with how you put it on and take it off, and you kind of slide it on and off, it can cause some issues there. But for the most part, I've had a long and successful history with magnetic tank bags, and I actually quite enjoy them. What about you, Zach? Rick's come at you. He's thrown the gauntlet down. He's challenging you. Do you agree or disagree with Rick?
I think you summed it up well. The gas cap mounted ones are fine. I like magnetic ones. I think they're good, and I think it's certainly you can scratch your tank with them. No question about it.
In fairness,
to me, it's sort of like saying
you can scratch.
Don't ever go down any stairs because you can fall down.
Well, you can scratch your tank with the gas cap mounted ones too, and I think that's another point to
Rick's
make.
gonna have some things to say to you.
So there's definitely certain mounts out there where the tank bag itself comes down and rests on the tank, and because of the weight distribution of the bag, it can rub only at one specific point versus the magnetic bags, which are evenly distributed across the entire tank. So
there are pitfalls no matter where you look. I think Rick makes a very good point that magnetic tank bags can pick things up, and it can scratch your tank. There is potential for that to happen. But I stand by magnetic tank bags. I think they're universal and they work well in general as long as you're careful. But I do appreciate your note, Rick, and I hope people learn something from what you said and our replies.
Well, I doubt they learned anything from our replies, but they probably learned something from Rick.
Point.
So let's move on to the next comment, which is an email from Adam. Adam, who later sends us in another email and admits that he was drunk when he sent us this and asked us to forgive his grammar. So Adam apparently went off on a tangent. He's having a wild Friday night, and how he likes to get his jollies off is sending Zack and I emails where he says, I purchased a 1986 SRX6 with 6,000 kilometers on it. I believe Adam is Canadian, right? That's why we're doing everything in
Yes,
kilometers.
that's 3,700 miles.
There you go. Maybe I should have purchased a V-Strom. What is with the V-Strom comments? But he says, man, I love my SRX. When my father saw the bike, he said it would be a shame to ride it. He's taken it on a 1,000-kilometer road trip. How many miles is that, Zach?
600-ish.
600-ish. Buzzing along at 100 kilometers an hour, which is roughly like 60, 65 miles an hour. Nearly cruising steadily around 4,000 RPM. And he puts in parentheses that red line is at 7,000 RPM. He then put another 6,000 kilometers on it in half a year. He has a question for us. He goes, is my father right? Is it a shame for that something survived for so long only to have me ride it and slowly turn it into a beater bike? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it has to do with your outlook on certain, to certain people they would say like, oh, you have an original BMW R80 GS with 3,000 miles on it. How dare you? How could you ride that? It's a classic. It's a pivotal bike of all time, or like a low mileage Honda CB750 from the late 60s or something like that. How dare you ride it? Whereas other people would say, it's a bike. It deserves to be ridden. It was built to rev and ride and chew up tires and so on and so forth. And it's a tricky, this is an interesting one because Adam's dad sees this bike as a classic, right? Adam's dad is sort of like, oh, an SRX6, my goodness. How could you? Whereas many people would look at it and think, whatever, it's a freaking Yamaha from the 80s. Who cares? Just ride it, I think Adam has the right outlook. And I will admit that it's impossible, I think, to separate oneself completely, from the emotional aspect of this. And my dad had an SRX6 actually when I was a kid. So I remember having one around, and it has a bit of sentimental value to me. But even still, I think he's making the right call. I do think that there's a bike out there that would be so precious that I would think, oh, I can't ride it. I just have to look at it. But an SRX6 is not one of them. What about you, Spurge?
I agree with Adam and you on this, and to the extent of, we started off the questions and comments talking about, the guitar that I have behind me here, and this is something that I get a lot, not just with motorcycles, but oftentimes with guitars, where, for me, old guitars, vintage guitars get a lot of this same question. You shouldn't play it. You should take care of it. You should, baby it. And I think for me, I look at motorcycles and guitars in the same vein that they were meant to be used. They were meant to be played. They were meant to be ridden. And I think, for this SRX, like if you're enjoying it, go ride it. Like, and if you get to a point where you want to clean it back up and turn it back into a collector's item, go ahead. But really, I don't look at motorcycles as collector's items. I don't care how valuable they are. If I had a Vincent in the garage, I would want to go out and ride it. I mean, that's just how I feel. That's part of the joy of ownership is riding, playing, enjoying what the item is. So I'm all for Adam keeping this bike on the road. Agreed.
Keep riding it, Adam. And maybe if you can afford it someday, get him a nice Cherry SRX so he can have it in his living room. Next question is from Alexander, who, in reference to the Moto industry's biggest blunders American edition, that was episode 4 of season 5, Alexander says, what do you think about Keanu's Arch motorcycles? Do you think, I don't think you ever mentioned one of them in Highside, Lowside. I wonder why. Well, it's because we are deep in a lawsuit with Arch Motorcycles and Keanu Reeves. He believes that Spurgeon is too handsome and should be banned from the internet. And we disagree. So we are locked in a legal battle, and we are unable to say anything good or bad about Arch Motorcycles until then. Is that right, Spurgeon?
It's been going on for years. And what I don't understand is I think there's enough space on the internet for someone as good looking as Keanu and someone as good looking as myself to coexist.
I agree.
Because the evening out here that I think Keanu's not taking into account is that there's also people on the internet like Zack. And I think it helps to balance out the equation, if you know what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you need some sort of anecdote for all of this ugly here.
And if Keanu would take that into account, there would be less animosity thrown at me. But we, like Keanu Reeves, we actually have had quite a few conversations about Arch motorcycles offline, and this is an open welcome. We would love to have Keanu onto the podcast, not to talk about Bill and Ted's excellent journeys, but simply to talk about motorcycles, to talk about Arch motorcycles, to talk about his lifelong infatuation with two wheels, and I think it would be a fun episode. So maybe we can do that.
I agree. And maybe one of these days we'll get an Arch motorcycle on Daily Rider. I've been working on that for what it's worth. Next question/comment/question comes in from Cody. You know who you are. This comes from another question in relation to episode 8 of this season with Patrick Garvin about modifying cruisers. Cody says, I have an 84 Honda Magnus 700. I've ridden it quite a lot. When I rode it to my dad after buying it, he was excited and told me that he had one himself. I wasn't aware of that. Gotcha. So this is a sort of family connection happening here. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole thing because Cody had a lot to say.
Well, he's left it sitting in his shed for over a decade, and his father has since passed away, and now he wants to bring the bike back to life to go out and ride. I think I'm correct.
Spurgeon, you're correct. Continue.
Yeah, so Cody brought the bike home and shared it with his dad. His dad really, they had this moment with it, but life happens. The bike got put in the shed, and Cody's father, unfortunately, passed away. And so he now has the itch to ride, to bring the motorcycle out of storage, and to kind of be able to spend some time, mentally with his dad through going out and riding this motorcycle. And the question that he had for us was, Cody was trying to hunt down a shop manual on eBay, and he said that, he noticed that these kinds of cruisers don't have much, for maintenance series or YouTube content out there on the internet. Does this mean that it's going to be more challenging, or maybe parts aren't as acquirable? Maybe my question isn't valid, but I just wanted a little bit of advice, as this is something that I believe it's a he, but he or she wants to know if they should tackle this.
So basically, Cody wants to work on the bike, but isn't sure, hasn't seen a lot of content about Honda Magnus, and what's the deal, and is it worth doing?
Well, I think the first part of this is the internet did not exist in 1984 when the Honda Magna was introduced. So
that probably has something to do with it.
I think that's probably your first answer here. Zack, you actually had the best answer for this, and the fact that the Honda Magna, for those of you that are not aware, is a V4. This is a 700cc V4, so you got two cylinders going in each direction. So unlike the parallel inline 4 conversation we had earlier, for those of you that are not watching the YouTube video, but you're listening, I've got my fingers up, shaped like a V, with two fingers going in each direction. So it's a V4, and the beauty of a Honda is that it's very reliable. So part of the reason you don't see repair content on Hondas is because, well, frankly, Cody, they just last forever. The flip side of this is that when it does need repair, this is a pretty challenging motorcycle to work on, because the carburetors are stuck down in between the bank of cylinders. And for those of you that are further not aware, in 1984, motorcycles use carburetors, not fuel injection. And that's probably going to be the one thing that you're going to have to pull apart and clean out, Cody. That about exactly. a good summary of where your head was at, Zack?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, this particular Honda is fairly reliable and fairly complicated. So it's not exactly a dream for anyone to make videos about working on it, because you either don't have to or you don't want to. It's not that it's not beyond the scope of what is possible for a home mechanic to do by any means. It's just it's just going to be a little bit trickier than usual. As far as why there isn't more content about him, this could be the same reasons could apply. That could be why people haven't made a lot of content on it. And I don't know what to say about that, except that I'm probably not going to make a Honda Magna 700 rebuild video anytime soon. So you just might have to cross your fingers.
Well, based on our response earlier into the functionality of a knock sensor, you can understand why Zack would not be making that content, the same as myself. We'll leave that up to Ari Henning. But what I would say is that, Cody, this is a motorcycle that, really, you're probably going to be looking at rebuilding the carburetors, and it's going to be challenging, but it's not going to be impossible. And then you're probably going to have to change the oil. change the coolant and ride it and have a good time. I mean, the only other thing I could think of is maybe, the fork oil and the fork seals would need to be replaced. But chances are you should be able to get this bike running without a lot of heavy lifting. And it's something that should last forever. And I've pulled many 80s Hondas out of barns to get them going again for friends. And I've done that more than once. So to Zach's point, once you get them going, they're fairly bulletproof, and you're probably going to want to throw a new set of tires on there as well. So
good thinking, among other things.
But let us know how it works out, Cody. Hopefully,
keep us posted.
Yeah. By the time we do our next comments episode, we can read a comment about how you got your Honda Magna running again. And it's a fun engine, by the way. For those of you that don't know, that V4 that Honda was running from the 80s on was a hoot to ride.
Moving on to the next set of comments here, we're going a little more negative here. We're going with some people who didn't agree with us, but we got to do this sometimes.
Believe it or not, audience, the world doesn't always agree with everything that Zach and I have to say.
Ridiculous. With regard to the moto industry's biggest blunders, American Edition, which was episode 4, Gregory wrote in and said, first of all, Patrick Garvin is my hero. Agreed. I think we can agree with that. Gregory also says, while you guys focused a lot on Harley, and all of it is fair, which Gregory says he says as a current Harley owner, I would love to hear you guys touch on Indian's tried and failed revivals, and to touch on some of the history of bikes from the pre-war era, such as Ace motorcycles or Whizzer kits. Any of them could have changed American motorcycle history pretty drastically if they didn't fail. Spurgeon, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Gregory, I appreciate you writing him. I thought that this was interesting, and you'll see why when we get into our next comment, because Gregory, while he is a Harley-Davidson owner, did feel that, a lot of what we had talked about was fair. The one thing that I would say here is that I believe we touched a little bit on Indian motorcycles, just failed revivals, right? If not, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure we talked about that a little bit in the fact that, like, for those of you that don't know this, Indian went out of business in the 50s, and
50,
then they were
or something maybe?
Yeah, and then they were bought, and the brand name was bought and sold to all these half-assed attempts to revive the brand, and
passed around like an old hat.
Exactly. And it wasn't until Polaris bought them that they've reestablished themselves as a brand of quality and integrity, and they've actually made a real go at it. So I do believe we talked about that a little bit. The one thing that I want to say is that he mentioned Whizzer kits. For those of you that aren't aware, a Whizzer kit was like a little engine you could get that you strapped to a bicycle, and you kind of turned your bicycle into a motorcycle. And this was like in the early 30s, 40s-ish. Don't quote me on the exact time frame. But to me, I think the Whizzer kits, while it sounds like Gregory kind of has these as a failure, I think that they were a really cool piece of American history, and I don't see them being as a historical blunder at all. I think that that's something that got a lot of people onto two wheels during that time period. And frankly, I wish we had something like that today. I wish you could buy, and maybe that's kind of what e-bikes are today, right? Like e-bikes are kind of the Whizzer kit of the
it's
pre-war era.
It's the modern moped, some of them,
Yeah.
especially ones that have pedals. But yeah, anyway, I think that's a fair commentary there, Gregory, and we appreciate very much that you tipped your cap to our Harley criticisms. Being a Harley owner, I tip my cap back to you, being someone who can ride a motorcycle, enjoy it, but also understand its failings or pieces of history that weren't so flattering.
So, and I would say this to you, Gregory, as well, as someone that often gets knocked on for talking about KTMs on this podcast. I actually I was recently at the Ducati press launch for the Desert X, and our producer Spencer turned to me. He goes, "Listen, tell me what you hate about your KTM that you own." And this is kind of insight into how Spencer produces a video and gets us thinking outside the box. And I was like,
and you shriveled up like Voldemort. You were just like,
the KTM has throttle response. It's got a crappy clutch, and the brakes are garbage. So I think it's important to note, especially as we go into the next comment, that like I have absolutely eyes wide open for the bikes that I enjoy. Gregory, I appreciate that it sounds like you have a similar appreciation and open-eyed approach to the bikes that you enjoy. The next comment comes in from USMC Vet in response to the same moto industry biggest blunders, and does not feel the same way that Gregory does. This individual says, well, I can see how this is going. You're going to trash all the stereotypical things about Harley Davidson, and if they even ever have a European-Japanese episode, most likely they're going to deal with that with kid gloves. It makes me miss Lemmy, as trashing Harley Davidson has become the calling card of this podcast. Lemmy was the only advocate Harley Davidson fan had here. Now, it brings on the HD... Oh, now they bring on the old HD guy who's an aftermarket parts salesman, and surprise, he trashes stock Harley Davidsons while selling the virtues of aftermarket parts. The ST bikes, referring to the Dyna ST, is that what he was talking about here?
No, the
Lowrider.
The sport touring, the Lowrider ST, and then the Street Glide and Road Glide STs.
So goes on to say the ST bikes are going to sell like hotcakes. Are they going to compete with a leader bike on the track? Obviously not. But they're sportier themed baggers. They will definitely be outselling those leader bikes, however. The jab about the Lowrider ST taking a team of HD engineers to do what people do in their garages, yes, because you can tell the difference between an OEM factory product and one that was placed together in a garage. Then goes on to say that was a silly and inappropriate comment. Lot of thoughts here.
Does not like Patrick Garvin's take on Harley's ST models and stuff.
I thought Patrick's take was hilarious, and I stand behind. It was a funny comment to make.
I think the USMC vet is a presumably a Marine Corps veteran, so thank you for your service. What this person's pointing out in some ways is very true. Those bikes probably will sell well. They probably will outsell leader bikes for performance. I think that this reaction to our comments to me is an overreaction, because Gregory, a Harley owner, heard our comments and said, "Oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. I like my Harley for this reason, but you're pointing out some things that Harley did wrong in the past and is doing wrong now, and okay, maybe that's how you feel, but I've got a Harley, I like it." Whereas this person, this is a typical reaction from someone whose bike has been criticized, I think, which is to say oh, you just want it to be fast, you just want it to be a GSXR, and that's not really what we're saying or what we said. I don't think. I think we were just sort of disappointed in all the fanfare for something that ultimately is a pretty minor update to a line of motorcycles that is undeniably successful. I think if Harley just sort of sent out a press release and said hey, we got ST models now, we did a little sportier thing, but instead they gathered the world's journalists together and they made a presentation and they talked about how we road race a Road Glide now and see how it's kind of the same, and that type of rhetoric and pomp and circumstance invites criticism. And I think that's what Harley Davidson got for that from us, was criticism. And not because they're bad bikes, not because they won't sell well, but for those reasons.
And I also want to defend Patrick here for a second too, because, and this goes back to USMC Vet's comment about comparing this to a leader bike. We weren't doing that. We were talking about the fact that this is using the highest, biggest, most, top of the line performance bike that Harley makes. And Patrick's comment was about the fact that instead of buying this particular motorcycle, that you could get a used lowrider, put a big bore kit in it, and make more horsepower for less money than what you would get off the shelf. I think Patrick was simply talking about the performance gains you could get versus what you could get stock with this particular motorcycle. I don't think any of us were comparing it to a leader bike, but I think that it's an important note to make for someone out there in the audience thinking about spending their hard-earned dollars on a $27,000 lowrider ST, or finding a used lowrider for I don't know, $15,000, and then putting a big bore kit in it for a couple extra grand and having a bike that actually does have a bit more performance to it. That's all.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. Well, as usual, the reason that we read this comment was not to get the last word necessarily. It's to point out that other people have other opinions, and our opinion is not the gospel. We understand that this Marine Corps vet is a big fan of Harley Davidson and what they do, and that's fair. And I think that, like I said, the points made about sales numbers, about about the sort of like pride and aesthetic that Harley Davidson takes to make the bikes look a certain way. I think you can't deny any of that stuff.
And I think I don't think we talked about that. I think there's a reason that Harley Davidson is still the number one motorcycle seller in America at this point in time. Now they've lost market share, but they're still I believe number one. What I want to close on is that the final note that I had for you, USMC vet, is that we are planning on doing either a Japanese or a European episode in season 6, and I promise you that our intent is not going to be to handle it with kid gloves. The same way I can lash out critique at my own motorcycles that I own in my garage, and I've got some critique on all of them because none of them are perfect. I plan on handling that the same way when we go after Japanese OEMs and when we go after European OEMs. And to keep in mind too that this is fun. Like this is we're here to create entertainment. So when Patrick Garvin or Zack Quartz or Spurgeon Dunbar says something, part of what we're trying to do is to entertain. I don't think there's any real bad blood or animosity here towards anyone.
Look no further than the best and worst looking motorcycles of all time episode to know that we can bash companies other than Harley Davidson, for crying out loud. Next comment is with regard to Moto Industries' biggest blunders, American edition, yet again.
Raphael.
And it reads, Raphael, yeah, there's a second Raphael. Is the same person with two good questions?
We'll never know.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. This or the same, Raphael says, not sure it's an American blunder necessarily, but I'm curious as to your take on the rise and demise of Motus motorcycles. I've never ridden one, but the MST or MST-R is my unicorn dream bike. So maybe a quick background on Motus here, Spurge, because I don't know if everyone knows what Motus is.
I feel like we talked
about
about this in the episode. At least in my head, we talked about this in the episode. We talked about the fact that one of the biggest blunders was Harley Davidson not buying Motus and allowing Motus to go out of business, because Motus was a company based, I believe, in Alabama that was making V4 engines that were is it transverse mounted. Yeah.
Longitudinal crank. So like a Moto Guzzi or a Honda CX-500, you have their cylinders, they're V twin engines, but the cylinders stick out to the sides underneath
Zack,
the gas
the
tank.
Motus is a big sport touring bike. You compare it to a Honda ST1300, big V4 with its cylinder head sticking out the side, not a VFR.
Right, VFR is a correct. I think, yeah, the Moto Guzzi is just an easy way to imagine it because the cylinders are so prominent. Or I feel like an ST1300, it's like hard to even, you could like not even know that that's a V4. It's like so tidily tucked in there, you know?
Who could not know it's a V4? How dare you? Our Highside, Lowside audience knows what an ST1300 is, my friend. Anyway, we're getting off track, as is our theme at Highside, Lowside. The Motus was an amazing motorcycle, like 150-something horsepower, big sport touring bike. The R version of the MST was, Olin suspension and all the bells and whistles. And they went out of business, and they stopped manufacturing them. I don't think that the Motus was an American blunder by any means. I think that it was an amazing feat of engineering, and I wish that they could have continued. The problem with Motus was that because production was so small, prices were sky high, and they were very
very expensive.
Not approachable to put one in your garage. And I think that the blunder there was that Harley Davidson should have bought them, and they could have produced a big romping American V4 sport touring bike. But again, maybe that wouldn't have been profitable for them, so what do I know?
And it would have been the new Buell, and everything would have worked out perfectly, as we all know.
I don't think so what I will say here is that there's a lot of you out there, our listeners, that have like a big soft spot in your heart for Buell. because we had so many comments about Buell in regards to this episode, and like people just loving Buell. And I have nothing against Buell, but like there's some of you out there that like I'm concerned about. I'm worried for, because like there's a lot of emotion there. But yeah, I was actually really interested to see how many people are still kind of hanging on to the Buell thing. So
Right. Well, bringing up Modus is a good point, Raphael. We appreciate the comment and appreciate the opportunity to come around to it and chew it over. I think, like you said, not necessarily a blunder, but the demise of the company does raise the question of sort of like what happened. And maybe we'll do
it was a blunder in the fact that like it's a bummer that they went out of business. You know.
Yeah. True enough. All right. So the next comment I really like. Oh, do you want to read this one? It's to you. Or do you want me to read it?
Prodigal Stranger, who's a regular listener and commenter, is someone that wrote in and said, "Happy 30th birthday, Spurge. I wish I was turning 30. I'm staring down the barrel of 40, and it's terrifying. But I appreciate the fact that Prodigal Stranger thinks that I'm turning 30. He says, guys, the Wiener Dog, and this is Should You Modify Your Cruiser, Highside, Lowside, Season 5, Episode 8, says, guys, the Wiener...
Hang on. Sorry, I just realized that this is with regard to the news section of that podcast. It didn't have anything to do with cruisers or when you should modify them, but we talked about the Honda Dax. And
good clarification.
The Honda Dax is a little Honda mini moto bike that's coming out in Europe or England or something, not coming to the United States, and we lamented that, and we noticed that the little badging on the side of the Honda Dax, there was a little wiener dog, and we thought, why is the wiener dog the sort of like theme of the mascot for the Dax? And then this is where Prodigal Stranger comes in.
Prodigal Stranger corrects us and educates us, which is awesome. Says, guys, the wiener dog is actually called a Dachshund hound, and
a Dachshund.
Dachshund hound. Mm-hmm. Sorry. And so when you shorten that, it's shortened to Dax, which is akin to calling a guy named Albert Al. So he gives us an example then. So it all makes sense now. The Dachshund hound is shortened to Dax, and that's where Honda got the name. And because it kind of looks like a wiener dog, if you will.
We don't have any verification if this is true, but it sounds very plausible, and we love the backstory, and so thank you for educating us.
And again, thank you for the 30th birthday wishes.
Agreed. All right, last comment. We've made it to the end, and did we save the best for last? Well, that's up to you, not us, but we got a real kick
I think we did.
Okay. This email comes in from Michael. Michael says, and I quote, I am a merchant mariner working on tugs on the West Coast, mostly between Seattle, Alaska, and Hawaii. Those are some long trips there. Michael says, it's really nice to stay connected to the moto world while out of cell and internet service for weeks at a time. I find your show insightful and fun and listen to it as I pass the time in the wheelhouse, staring into the void of the Pacific. See, it's really all about, quick sidebar here, it's really all about your what you compare Highside, Lowside to. Like, is it as good as a big Hollywood blockbuster? Probably not. Is it as good as having a real conversation with a real person? Probably not. But is it better than just staring into the void of the Pacific? Maybe.
Yeah. For hours on end, just out there on a tugboat. Yeah, we're probably winning there. So
Michael goes on to say and share with us quite brilliantly, hope all's well with the Highside Lowside team, and that these poorly drawn comics featuring Zack Quartz, that's spelled Quartz, like the rock, and Spurgeon Dunbar, that's with a T like the fish, with guest appearances by producer Chase and Lance Oliver, will garner a smile or two. Now, Michael drew Highside Lowside comics that feature us as characters, and they are
it's amazing.
Excellent.
Amazing. Yeah. So for those of you listening to the podcast, you can't see it right now, but we're going to throw a couple of these up on the screen for those of you on the YouTube audience. We're also going to let you know that we like these so much, we reached out to Michael and we're published them in a common thread article so that everyone could see them because Michael put some time and effort in here, and I'll be honest with you, Zach and producer Chase and I spent probably about 30 minutes the other day going through this episode, just reading and laughing and cracking up on the comments or on the comics. So Zach, what was your favorite?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to give away too much, but
they're up on the screen right now. Give them away. Paint a picture for our podcast audience.
So my character, Zack Quartz with a Q, is basically a little stick figure guy with geode, with like rock, crystallized rock coming out of his head, because rock. Get it, everybody? And then Spurgeon Dunbar is just a fish with a big underbite fangs, because Spurgeon is a fish. And so the characters are a lot of fun. And Michael did great. So one of my favorite things is that at one point, Spurgeon says something like whatever, man, like, I'm not impressed with you. And then I say, Spurgeon Dunbar, not impressed. And you can tell that Michael drew the voice, because like my eyes are all like crossed and I'm freaking out, like I'm shouting. And the artwork is very, very evocative. And yes, let's see who else. So Lance also is in there. He's a robot of some kind.
No, he's not a robot. He's a lance.
He's a lance.
So you're learning something new too. It's like a long sword from the Middle Ages with a little head on it. But like the best part about this is the facial expressions. Like he nails it. Like at one point, he has us fighting squids, and there's an image of me taking a crowbar to a squid, and then Zack is beating a squid with a wrench, and like the smile that he draws on Zack's face is with like the helmet hanging off the side of it's so good. Oh.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, we're taking a lot of pleasure in beating up the squids. The squids, by the way, don't wear motorcycle gear, and in the comic, they don't agree with motorcycle gear because they're squids. And so we, being somewhat aquatically themed, we go after the squids and we kill them, which is accurate. We don't want no squids with no gear.
The best is the best is me as a fish flipping off the squids, but I have a flipper, so you can just like a flipper holding up. And the thing is here too, Michael is clearly not just a listener of Highside Lowside, but is also someone that is clearly versed in the history of Common Tread and the work that we do over there, because he has Lance on criticizing me for using too many music references in my articles, which is something that has happened on Common Tread for years, where like I'll write an article and like put in like a bunch of music references, and Lance will take them out, and then we get into a fight in the comments section of the article. So it's really impressive to see how well he's been following the Common Tread, Highside, Lowside, RevZilla content history over the past 9 years or so. So really impressive stuff.
There's references to the Highside Lowside drinking game, to Spurgeon's KTM, to his Bonneville road trip, to my Spurgeon Dunbar voice, as we said. It's very the
to Motul. There's a Motul reference in here.
There are a couple of Motul references. Motul will be happy to know that
Chase, our producer, is depicted as an overlord. What does he say? He goes.
It's after I said something that was supposed to be intelligent, and then you said like, whatever, man. And then that's when I reply and I say, Spurgeon Dunbar, blah, blah, blah. And then Chase says something like dance, monkey dance or something.
He goes less existential dread, more dance, monkey dance. Yeah.
Which is very accurate. Anyway, we just wanted to give a shout out to Michael, and as we said, there'll be an article on Common Tread with the comic strips there for you all to read and enjoy, peeking a little window into Michael's mind as he goes across the Pacific on tugboats. So thank you again, Michael. That was a real treat. Can't wait to show all my motorcycling friends that I'm featured in a comic. I'm very flattered.
Well, that is going to come to a close. Our comments episode of season 5. We've got one more episode for you. It is going to be the season finale. We've got a very special guest. Zach, do we tell them who it is, or do we leave it as a surprise?
We don't tell them who it is, but we say that they are, I don't know. We say they are an avid motorcyclist. They have competed on a grand stage on motorcycles, and I think What else? They have more than 1 million Instagram followers. So like someone of some amount of repute has actually agreed to hang out with us. And I don't think we paid a big fee or anything. So I don't know.
Well,
Anyway,
either way, I'm excited. I'm excited for the final episode. I've been excited for this episode. The comments episode is always a fun one for Zach and I to go through and read all of the emails and the comments that you've sent in through the season. Something that we try to do with every episode, but it's nice to have one episode specifically where we just focus on all of our listeners out there. Make sure that you're leaving comments on YouTube. Make sure you're sending emails to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. And as always, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast and leave those reviews over on the Apple Podcast platform. It does help us find, it does help people find the show, and it helps us with the ratings for the podcast.
Yeah, be like Batogi and Little Goliath. Leave a review for us that's entertaining, preferably, and we will potentially send you a T-shirt. Spurge, I think we're through the podcast here. I would like to reiterate what you said. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your comments, questions, emails, all that stuff. It's been great. I think we need someone to play us out. Can you? You
know what?
Can you play us out?
I like where your head's at. Let's do this. Let's see if I can. Like I said, feedback's pretty
hot mic.
There.
We got a real hot mic.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and we'll see if we can do this one last time. So thanks to everyone for paying attention to what we do. Let's see if we got this.